And just like that, my craft projects are tidy and my brain doesn't need to do any of the work. Hello and welcome to my much requested Notion tour. Today I'm going to take you through the broad strokes of what Notion is, what I personally needed to get from it, and how exactly I did that. We'll see how I use Notion to track my craft ideas and inspiration, my pattern library, my active craft projects, and my ongoing capsule wardrobe goal. Maybe it'll be interesting and helpful, or maybe it'll be a terrifying glimpse into the inner workings of a dangerous mind. Only time will tell. If you're new here today, hello, my name is Michelle and I love to do all of the crafts, but especially the stitchy ones. On this channel you'll find cross-stitch, yarn crafts and sewing, project vlogs, tutorials and freebies. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, why not hang around? Okay, Notion. So first of all, I know a lot of you are curious about what Notion even is. To put it simply, it's a tool to organise and display information in various ways. That's it. People use it to keep on top of work, school, personal goals and habits, all sorts of things. And it's great for people like me who prefer things to be displayed in an easily scannable visual way. There are paid plans, but for most individual use like mine and probably yours, the free plan is more than enough. There are web, desktop and mobile versions, although as with most things, I'd recommend doing any complicated setup on a full-size screen and just using the phone app for actually viewing things as needed. By the way, if you already know how to use Notion and you just want to skip to the tour, I'll put a timestamp up here for you. For the rest of you, I've set up a brand new workspace here so I can show you what it looks like before populating everything. You'll start off with a few default pages showing some common uses, and you can also check out the template library and choose something to use as a base. But I'm going to delete all that default stuff and start from a blank page. Basically, Notion works on a system of pages and sub-pages. You can fill these pages with whatever you want, from basic text to embedded images and video to mathematical formulas. Format your pages with headings, dividers and columns, and you can keep your notes in a nice digestible format. Now, aside from pages, the other big concept is databases, and this is where Notion gets really exciting. You know, if you're a nerd. Let's say we create a database of books. Each entry in this database is itself a page, so you can add content to it just the same way as we've seen. But database pages can also have properties attached to them. Since we're doing books here, we'll go with author, genre, cover image, and a checkbox to say whether I've read it or not. Simple stuff. Adding these properties to one page in the database adds them to all pages in that database, so we don't need to set this up for every book we add. We can show or hide whatever properties we want in our table, and of course we could filter or sort this table, but we can also change the display type away from regular table to all sorts of other things. Classic board layout. Calendar and timeline we'll see later since they need a date field. List is super simple, and honestly I never use it. Gallery is my favourite. It's a card type display, and you can optionally use an image property as for example our book covers. And the third and final concept I want you to grasp before we go further is linked databases. Basically, this is a way of adding a new view of the same database. So if I choose our books database as my source here, I'll leave it on table this time and we'll filter it to only show books that we've not read yet. Then let's change the gallery to show only books we have read, add some headings, and there you go. A perfectly simple way to track your reading goals. That's probably a lot to take in, and we've only really just scratched the surface, but hopefully you get the general gist. Organising information and displaying it in various different ways. Okay, so onto my personal use case. My first use of Notion was actually to help plan my YouTube channel, but I soon realised I could use it for all kinds of other stuff too, including crafts. Back in the day when my only crafts were knitting and crochet, I could just keep all of my projects, my pattern library and my plans in Ravelry, and that worked great for years. But then cross-stitch came into the mix, and now sewing and everything else I get my grubby little paws into these days, and I started to really miss that feeling of just having everything in one place. I knew I wanted to record my current and completed projects, ideas for new projects, and I also wanted to track my goal of creating a me-made capsule wardrobe. So I figured if I'm setting all of that up, why not make a pattern library too? I also knew I wanted to be able to update it, say, once a week and not have a ton of manual updates to do every time. First up then, the pattern library. I am not going to lie to you, this took a lot of setup. It was worth it to me personally, it may not be at all to you. The whole point is tools like Notion let you set up something that works for you specifically. So here I have patterns from every craft in a gallery layout. They're tagged with the craft, the category of item, and some more complicated stuff that I'll get to in a bit. The part that's going to make you question my sanity here is that despite all but about 3 of these patterns being digital, I haven't actually uploaded the PDFs to the library. See, I keep all of my pattern PDFs in Google Drive, organised by craft and category already, so there was really no need to spend ages uploading them here as well. If I see I have a cross-stitch pattern from Heaven and Earth that I want to start, I know exactly where that is in Drive, so it's no hassle to find. You could absolutely add a file upload here though, if that works better for you. As you can see, I've pre-sorted my library into the various crafts by creating multiple views. Obviously I could just filter the main view, but having these set up in advance saves a bit of time. There's also this Used tab, which currently shows my patterns that I've used in projects that are in Notion. Basically, this view just exists because I find it satisfying to look at. It doesn't really have any practical use. I'll go through how that works after we've looked at my projects page, but a flaw here is obviously that I have a lot of craft projects I did before I created this setup in Notion. So the patterns associated with those projects don't currently show as used. There are all kinds of ways I could fix that, but I've been leaving it for now because I'm not sure if I'm going to upload all of my old projects. I'm thinking about this now. I'm not going to do that anytime soon, let's face it. So let's come up with a quick solution right now. Back on my All Patterns list, I'm going to click any item and add a checkbox property. Let's call it Used Before Notion. That's straightforward enough. I'll turn that property to Visible in this view and just go through and check any that I know I used in older projects. There's quite a few, so I'll meet you back here in a second. Okay, with that done, I don't need this checkbox visible anymore. Let's head back to the Used tab. All I need to do is turn this simple filter to advanced. Now I can add the filter for our checkbox, and we want this to match either of the criteria, so switch to Or. And there we have it. Easy as that. Right, time to take a look at the wardrobe planner. So if you've been watching for a while, you know one of my long-term goals is to create a mostly me-made capsule wardrobe based on a set of guidelines that I wrote for myself. Perfect use case for Notion. I set up two databases here. One is for items of clothing and one is for outfits. A lot of these do still need photos taken, but don't judge me, it's hard to find the time, and also Heather kept bugging me to get this video out. A super cool thing you can do in Notion is relate databases to each other. So an outfit, for example, has this wardrobe items field where I can pick and choose what goes into it from the other database. Outfits are then categorized by weather and also how fancy they are, so I can do things like ask, what do I own that's suitable for a fancy afternoon tea, but in a cold, drafty castle? Oh, there we go. I've also got a checkbox for ready to wear because things like jeans are kind of essential and I am definitely not at the point where I can sew those yet, but it's handy to be able to filter them out and just look at the me-made things depending on what I'm doing. Further down the page then, I have this In No Outfits section, which is showing me that two of the tops I've made don't really fit with the rest, because if they did, I'd have already set up an outfit for them. That makes sense, honestly. These two were both knitted in about 2014 and I was just picking patterns at random. I do like them both, but they just don't necessarily go, you know? And then on the left here we have the things I still want to make. This isn't the outfits or clothing database, it's actually a view of my craft projects database. And when I add something here, it's immediately categorized as being for the capsule wardrobe. So let's get over to the project tracker and I'll show you what I mean. Let's have a look at the anatomy of a craft project. Obviously the name of the thing, the craft. Whether it's for a particular goal, like the me-made wardrobe we just talked about, or Operation Winter Survival, which anyone in the UK can probably guess at without further explanation. Status is basically how my whole setup works. Projects move from idea to planning to in progress to finished and fully finished, in theory avoiding detours into hibernating or frogged, but we all know how that goes. If I already know which pattern I'm going to use and it's in my library, I can link it here. As you can see, I haven't bought this pattern yet, but I do know which one I'm going for. Start and end dates are self-explanatory, and we'll look at planned date in a minute. A photo field for once the project is finished, and a notes field that shows up in various views and is just easier than clicking through to read actual page content. 3 checkboxes that I use to help me choose projects for specific situations, and a hidden field that, again, I'll explain in a minute. Okay, so first up is the ideas list. This is obviously a basic table view filtered to only show projects with a status of idea. One of the cool things about Notion is if you create a new item in a filtered view, it takes on those filtered attributes automatically. So if I add a new project from this view, it automatically gets a status of idea. This is what I meant on the wardrobe page, as this view is filtered to only show projects linked to the wardrobe goal, so ideas added from there will be tagged automatically. As we were just saying, some of these are very specific ideas and some are much more general. The general ones will get renamed to something more specific as I go and as I decide what's what, as well as having a pattern linked if necessary before they get officially planned. Now the progress section, which is really the meat of the page. This is a board display using our status field to organise projects in an easily scannable way. You'll notice the only properties I show in this view are the project name and the note, because I don't really need to see which belongs to which craft or which designer. I'm familiar with my whips. Boards are super easy to use, you just drag and drop. This is the main thing I check every week, to make sure everything's up to date, but also because it's pretty and I like looking at it. Next up we have the planning section. Again, it's just another view of the same crafts project database. This time it's a timeline view and it uses that planned date field we saw earlier. I use this just to get a rough idea of how many things I can tackle at once, but honestly don't ever really stick to it. It's more of a rough guideline and it does help me not start too much all at the same time, so that's pretty valuable, right? And then of course the fun part, completed projects. Obviously, since I've not imported the old stuff, this is all very recent, but it's just a gallery view filtered to only show projects that are finished or fully finished, because limiting to fully finished would be depressing. I've also grouped them by which year they were completed. As you can see here, it's only 2022 at the moment, but if I import those old projects, or I guess wait a few more months, there'll be more than 1 year group to look at. Right at the bottom then is my project picker, which you've seen before, and is where those 3 situational checkboxes come into play. I don't really use this much, but sometimes, on occasion, it's just nice to have these little categories set up by past me, so I know actually I shouldn't be taking the pixels that made us sell on a car trip. There is a lot going on this page, but as you can see, it's all just one database displayed in multiple ways that make the most sense to me. Pretty swish, right? So that's basically my setup, but for those of you who are curious, I'm going to very quickly go over how the Used tab in the pattern library actually works, because it illustrates a couple of cool things about Notion, and it also explains some of those hidden properties we've seen around the place. First of all, and as we've seen, projects can have a pattern attached to them, and that relation goes both ways, so patterns also have the project related to them automatically. Patterns also have this project count property, which is what is known in Notion as a roll-up. Roll-ups can do basic calculations based on a relation, so for example it can count how many unique relations or projects this pattern has. My filter in the Used tab is looking for patterns where this field is greater than 0, so pretty simple really. Of course, I can never have things be quite that simple, so one problem I quickly identified with this is that patterns would show up as used as soon as they were linked to a project, even if that project was still in the idea stage, and that would never do. So I added this count as project property onto my project database. This is a formula property, and what this gibberish here does is essentially tick the box when the project status is set to anything other than idea or frogged. My rollup field in the pattern library looks at all the related projects, adds up how many of them have this checkbox ticked, and ta-da! Now my Used tab doesn't show patterns where the project is just an idea or has been abandoned and frogged. We're definitely leaning towards the dangerous mind outcome here, aren't we? One problem that you might already suspect with Notion is that people spend hours and hours coming up with these elaborate systems and then kind of forget to use them or find them to be too much hassle. That's why I focused on setting this up so that it could be updated just once a week. For my day-to-day tasks, I use an app called Amazing Marvin, and over there I have a weekly reminder to just pop over here and make sure everything's up to date. I'll add any new ideas knocking around in my brain, check the status of projects, and tell myself for the millionth time that this is the weekend I finally finished taking wardrobe photos. And just like that, my craft projects are tidy and my brain doesn't need to do any of the work. Okay, if you're still with me, thank you, because I know that was a lot and right now you're probably quite concerned for my mental state. Honestly though, I had so much fun setting all of this up. I love to come up with systems for organising things. It's just how my brain works. Other people prefer something much simpler and I'll never understand it, but I do respect it. Because everything you've just seen is so customised to my own needs, there's not much point putting it out for you as a template to use. But if anyone out there would like to try Notion and liked any particular parts of my setup, let me know down in the comments and I'll see about making a stripped down version that you can maybe use as a base. I hope you enjoyed this peek behind the curtain and that it maybe inspired you to find a system of your own. Or maybe you already have your system sorted, in which case I would love to hear all about that. Alright, I'll be back soon for some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff. Bye!